response to Michael Roberts' recent postings. Michael Roberts is a Marxist economist who has a reasonably well-followed blog called Michael Roberts Blog, and he has recently published some material by himself and by a pal of his, Karchedi, about probabilistic Marxism, basically attacking probabilistic Marxism. Now, what is probabilistic Marxism? Well, there are hints of it in some things that Engels wrote, but the real start of the idea came with a book called The Laws of Chaos, which was written by two mathematicians, Farjoun and Machover, and used an entirely novel approach based on ideas from statistics and statistical mechanics to validate the Marxist labour theory of value. And there are subsequent books following this approach. I'm a co-author of one of these, and a second one was produced by Farjoun Machover and Dave Zachariah, who's also a good Marxist economist. Now, Roberts has objections to this, particularly relating to the conversion of values into prices of production. This is a quote from Roberts, containing a quote by Roberts from Farjoun and Machover. So what Roberts says is, like many other critics, Farjoun and Machover reckon that this conversion from value to prices of production is inconsistent because prices of production will then not be uniquely determined by a quantity of value and labour time. Farjoun and Machover argue that Marx was wrong, and Marxists must recognise, and here's the quote from Farjoun and Machover, there is no rigid relation between labour content and price. The ratio between price and labour content is a random variable which can assume for any given transaction any positive numerical value. Now, note that they talk about individual transactions. Farjoun and Machover did not say that a theory needs to uniquely determine price in terms of labour time. In fact, that the gist of their argument is to say exactly the opposite. That's not what their objection to prices of production are. Their objection is that prices of production theory depends on equalised profit rates. And we know that these equalised profit rates don't really happen. Now, in an email to me today, Machover has said there is another objection to prices of production theory, in that it has, as he put it, embalmed Marxism. It has caused a couple of generations of Marxist economists to be obsessed with an impossible task of justifying prices of production theory. This is not something which classical Marxists of the time of social democracy or the communist movement were much concerned with. Now, let's look at that quote from Roberts quotes from Farjoun and Machover, that there is no rigid relation between labour content and price. The ratio between price and labour content is a random variable which can assume for any individual transaction any positive numerical value whatsoever. But Roberts cut short the passage in an important way, because immediately after that, Farjoun and Machover went on to say, from this point of view, the fact that equal individual quantities of labour content may and do capture widely different prices is not only perfectly acceptable, but is the very nature of a capitalist economy, i.e., they are accepting exactly what Roberts says they're rejecting. Term that ideal prices of individual commodity types do not exist. What theory deals with is the statistical distribution of random variables, such as the specific price of a whole range of commodities. So they are saying that there's a statistical theory here about prices. What does this mean? He's saying there's a probability distribution for selling prices relative to labour content, such that for all positive money prices, it has some non-zero value. But they're not saying that every money to labour ratio is equally probable. In fact, they say it has a distribution like this, such that the peak, or most probable result, is that goods sell at their value. Goods won't sell for less than zero. Some goods will sell several times their value, but it's a rapidly descending function, so that in practice, for larger values, we can ignore it. From a mathematician's standpoint, and they're mathematicians, it's still non-zero. But from a practical point of view, we can say there's a negligible probability of goods selling 10 times their labour value. They are defending a strong probabilistic statement of the law of value. Sales of commodities, according to them, cluster very close to 1 unit of money for 1 unit of labour. And this is not surprising. You've obviously got to define the units. Here's a way you can do it. If the unit of labour time is 1 minute, then the relevant unit of money will be total money sales, let's say in the week, divided by total minutes of work done this week. That will give the equivalence between money and labour. But it's not surprising that they have this statistical theory, because the classical economists already thought of the law of value in much this way. They all allowed that random fluctuations in supply and demand would cause price to differ from values, but they saw values as the centre around which prices move. What Farjoun and Machover did was cast this old insight, this insight which dates back to Smith, in more precise modern statistical language. What they predict is that given that kind of distribution I showed you earlier for the price-value relationship, if you took a bunch of industries and plotted along the x-axis the value of their output in some millions of person days, and on the y-axis the selling price of their output in millions of pounds, you would get a distribution looking something like this. What I've done here is not got real data. I have just simulated data with random number generators using the probability distribution function that Farjoun and Machover describe. And this is what their theory says you should see. But when we look at real economists, this is exactly what we see. We see exactly this kind of distribution. This is real data from the US. The only difference from the previous graph is that I've plotted this on a log-log scale, since the range of industry sizes is vastly greater than in my previous example. There's a range of industry sizes, 100 to 1 difference. So we see that their prediction in their 1983 book gives an excellent prediction of what the 1987 American economy would have. So that's pretty good going. What's Robert's next objection? Well, he says, writing sarcastically, what Marx and the rest of us apparently need to recognize is that individual profit rates are not determined by any definite amount of value measured in labour time, but are chaotic, ruled by laws of probability. So there is no average rate of profit, but only a scatter of profit rates. Well, of course there's an average rate. You can take an average of any distribution. What he is saying, when he uses the term average rate, he's assuming all profits are the average rate, that the average rate rules as the rate which all capitalists must accept or will get. But when we look at real data, what do we see? We see a scatter, something which he refers to sarcastically. Here is the Swedish economy data. This is a log scale, okay? And this is the profit rate, again a log scale. And there is a huge range of profit rates. It's more than a 10 to 1 difference, maybe 15 to 1 difference in profit rates vertically. If everything had the average rate, we would see all industries would fall on this dotted line or very close to it. No, they don't. They're spread all over the place. But insofar as there's any pattern to them, it's the pattern given by this line. This is the line you would get if there was a deterministic law of value such that all commodities sold at their values exactly, and all industries had the same rate of exploitation, in which case this would describe the rate of profit. Now, it's clear that the general trend of profit rates follows this slope. It's a sliding down characteristic. As the capital to wage ratio rises, the profit rate falls. Now, why is this predicted by Farjoun and Machover? Why does their theory say that this must be the case? And that graph was produced after Farjoun and Machover to test their theory. What they're saying is that the laws of statistics force prices to be strongly correlated with labour values. And this makes it impossible for profit rates to equalise. At any given organic composition of capital, firstly, there will be a spread of profit rates because the law of value is probabilistic. So if we look at this organic composition of capital, well, profit rates are spread. And that's because the law of value operates stochastically, not deterministically. And the second point they're saying is that profit rates will be lower in high organic composition of capital industries because of this strong correlation of prices to values. Now let me go into that in a bit more detail, what the justification for that is. They predicted that in most economies, the profit to wage ratio, in terms of Marx's volume 1 of Capital, S over V, will have a gamma probability distribution with a mean of 1. This is a plot of what a gamma distribution looks like. It's not a normal distribution because it's not symmetrical. It's highly clustered to the left-hand side. As the organic composition omega, which is equal to C over V, rises, the probable profit rate must fall, since the profit rate pi, the probable profit rate pi prime, is equal to S over C plus V. And if we take V to be 1, take the unit of V to be 1, then we have 1 over omega plus 1. Why is it omega plus 1? Because we say that the probable value of S over V is 1. So it's 1 over omega plus 1. And that's obviously a declining function of the organic composition of capital omega. So what they're saying is you expect the most probable profit rate at any organic composition of capital to be a declining function of the organic composition of capital. Now that's a prediction of their theory. And this is borne out in country after country. The previous graph I showed you was one prepared by David Zachariah. These are ones prepared by me and Alan Cottrell for the USA and the UK. Again, we see a spread, but a spread that has a declining tendency as C over V rises. there is certainly no single rate of profit. That nobody familiar with the empirical data could go on with this nonsense. Well, Roberts is still worried. Why does this matter? If an average rate of profit on capital invested cannot be determined and instead is either non-existent or merely random, then this drives a hole through Marx's law of the tendency of the falling rate of profit, and in turn of any compelling explanation of capitalist crises. Now, is this a valid worry? No, I don't think it is. Firstly, we can still measure the rate of profit for the whole economy. You just add up the profits of all firms and divide by the total capital stock of all firms, and that's the average rate of profit. You can still measure this average rate of profit. The fact that individual firms have different rates of profit doesn't stop the average existing. And even better, profit rate falls inversely with C over V. And we've shown that in the empirical data. So that if C over V, the organic composition, rises over time, as more and more firms move into the high C over V ratio, then the rate of profit for the whole economy on average will fall. So Farjoun and Machover don't undermine Marx's argument. They reinforce it. Marx's conclusions are safe. They're shown to be correct.